The latest football prizes competition offers you the chance to win a Lucas Paquetá signed West Ham shirt display in LED lighting. There are also 16 instant West Ham prizes that you have a chance to win. Plus, this month, 20% of proceeds go to the Downs South charity, which is local to West Ham. To enter, go to footballprizes.co.uk where you can find details of the competition and all terms and conditions. A very good evening to you. Welcome to the West Ham Voice on a Sunday evening and looking at the reflection of the game against Ipswich on Saturday. And we came away smiling, didn't we? Well, I hope most of us, if not all of us, did. One thing is for sure that a win does change the landscape. It makes us all feel an awful lot better, or it certainly should do. If you're new to the channel, please do subscribe to the channel. Content is always free. To subscribe is also free. And if you're new or an existing subscriber or just watching the show without being a subscriber, if you enjoy the content, please do hit that like button as well. So some critics will say that it's only Ipswich and that we should be beating clubs like this with relative ease anyway. I would argue that for a team that until Saturday had only lost against Manchester City and Liverpool in the league so far this season, and having come off the back of 4 straight draws against the likes of Fulham, Brighton, Southampton, and Aston Villa, and they actually made Aston Villa look quite plain the weekend before, a 4-1 victory against them, even though it was at home, I think was an excellent result. Added to that, the manner in which we won the game has also got to be taken into consideration. On Saturday, we looked a lot sharper. We looked a lot fitter. We were more at it. We had more intent. We had much greater tenacity. And from the first minute until the last, except, of course, for the equaliser that they scored, we were really in that game. We were really controlling that game. We had more possession, we had more shots. I think we had something like 13 or so shots actually on target. You know, it was a game that you've got to look at and say, you know what, everything that we've been hoping for actually fell into place on Saturday against Ipswich. And fingers crossed, it looks as if what Lopetegui is trying to do is beginning to bear fruit. We've seen glimpses of it in past games, maybe not enough, maybe only a half a game here and 40 minutes there and so on. But against Ipswich, it just really did all feel as if it was all falling into place. And I think that's really good. I think it's something that we now can hang on the back of. Now, our starting lineup, I've got to be honest, left many fans scratching our heads. You know, we kind of asked ourselves yet again, this is the team that lined up against Brentford in the first half last week, the weekend before, and we didn't really do that well. We were okay. I mean, we gave away an early goal, etc. So we kind of we were expecting to see some changes, and I don't think many of us actually saw the same lineup being announced. But this is the big divide, isn't it, between the fan base and the coach, the managers. You know, we don't see what goes on every minute behind the scenes. We don't get to see how players are doing close up in training that the coaches get to see. Added to that, we don't get to see the drills and the tactics played out on the training ground and on the whiteboard, you know, in between games. Now, as much as I want to praise the team and the coach for getting it absolutely right against Ipswich, and I will talk about what I think went well in a moment, I'm not going to get myself carried away in thinking that it's going to be perfect from here on in, because we know it's not going to be. when the next international break is over, we face we face Spurs away in a 12:30 kickoff on the 19th of October. Now, look, a win against Spurs will take us above them in the league by a point. A draw would keep us there or thereabouts in mid-table, but a defeat might result in knocking us further down the bottom half of the league. So it will all be to play for, but a similar performance in my mind to the one against Spurs, to the one that we gave against Ipswich, I think if we put in a performance like that, we could come away with a really positive result in a couple of weeks' time. But like I said, let's not get carried away to what might happen in 2 weeks' time or further in the future. We've got to take. I like what Lopetegui does. He says one game at a time. We only look forward to one game at a time. So let's talk about what happened in the game against Ipswich. We'll look at the lineup again. So, like I said, it kind of surprised us all that we didn't really see any changes. Yet again, a lot of complaints from a lot of fans saying that we're not going to win anything when we have the likes of Thomas Souček and Michail Antonio in the lineup. Now, I've, defended Souček. I think he's been one of our better players this season. But I've got to hold my hand up and say, when I see Antonio in the lineup, it doesn't fill me with much. It kind of makes me think we're kind of missing out somewhere. Now, I've been advocating for quite a few weeks that I thought Kudus should play up front with Kudus playing out right and Bowen playing up front, bringing Somerville into the game. I was disappointed yet again that Somerville was left on the bench. And then in the last week or so, I've been talking about, well, maybe Kudus should play that kind of false number 9 or number 10 role instead of Antonio. But I guess Antonio really proved his point at the weekend. But the lineup, I kind of looked at it and I went, okay, let's see what we could do in all respect. That kind of lineup, with the greatest of respect to Ipswich, should have been enough and clearly was enough to beat them. So what about the game itself? Well, we had an early start, didn't we? Fantastic start in the game where after a minute, Bowen set up Antonio for our first goal. I think it was on 58 seconds, something like that. Unfortunately, myself and a few mates were still trying to get into the stadium, so we missed that goal. But it was great for us to start brightly and for us to take the lead so early on in the game. But unfortunately, that didn't hold out for long enough, did it? Because within 6 minutes, Ipswich were level. Now, people are blaming Areola for their goal, which I don't necessarily agree with. I don't think their player should have been afforded all that space to actually have that shot on target in the first place. And I think Areola saw it a bit late and it took a little bit of a dip, didn't it? Or bobble or whatever. It bounced just in front of him, which made it all the more awkward for him. Now, people are suggesting that we need to go out and get ourselves a new goalkeeper because Areola doesn't command his 18-yard box. His distribution is no good either. It's interesting because it feels to me that for one reason or another, Areola is beginning to morph into what we were accusing Fabianski of being when he was our regular number 1 keeper, about not coming off his line, about not commanding his 18-yard box, about not distributing the ball well or distributing it quickly enough. And I've got to think to myself, now, when Areola first came to West Ham, he was by far the better distributor of the ball. He, to me, in the early stages of being at West Ham, seemed to be more commanding of his box. So I'm beginning to wonder, is it beyond the goalies? And has it got a lot to do with the way they're being coached in their goalkeeping techniques? Because I kind of do agree that Areola should be more commanding of his box. So there are times, he's a great shot stopper, Areola, but there are times when he just sticks to his goal line a bit too much. And his distribution has, without a doubt, gotten worse over time. But I don't really blame him for that goal that we conceded. I think we afforded Ipswich too much space and we should have closed them down well before that strike was on target. Then in defence, Emerson, Wan-Bissaka, Kilman, I think they all had pretty solid games. We saw that we were troubled a little bit with Emerson and Wan-Bissaka last week against Brentford, but we seem to have got that right this time round. And with Kilman as well, they played really well. Thomas Souček in the middle of the park helped to mop up and apply pressure in the middle of the park really well. And Rodriguez started, surprisingly for me, ahead of Alvarez, but even he looked quite comfortable on the ball. We kind of were worried about Calvin Phillips maybe having, coming back to West Ham and having more control in the centre of the park, but that didn't materialise either. And then, of course, Mohamed Kudus, I think, had a really good game. One of his better games on the left-hand side, even though I'm still not happy with the fact that he is being picked to play out on the left. But for me, I was really pleased that he got his goal. I think it's much needed to help boost his confidence. And I was pleased for him. I was pleased in this performance all round. He gave Ipswich a lot of trouble. He caused them a lot of pressure on the left-hand side, and it was good to see. Lucas Paquetá, another player that I think needed a much better game. I'm going to be honest with you. He gave the ball away a lot again. And against better teams in the middle of the park, they'll punish us. But he got away with it against Ipswich. But even he, overall, had a better game than we've seen him play in a West Ham shirt so far this season. And I was pleased for him to get his goal as well. An easy tap-in set up by Bowen. But again, we're seeing glimpses of what Paquetá can do. Again, you could argue, well, we played against a poor Ipswich team, but let me remind you again, they made Aston Villa look quite ordinary the weekend before. But the three players that I've got to really sort of focus on in this game against Ipswich were Jean-Claire Todibo in defence, Jarrod Bowen, and Mikel Antonio. Yes, you heard me right. I'm praising Mikel Antonio. Look, I know I've been quite critical of Antonio over the past couple of seasons because I don't think he is regular Premier League standard anymore. I'll come to him in a moment. I've got to focus on Jean-Claire Todibo because he put in a Rolls Royce of a performance in central defence, and now we're beginning to see why there was a real concerted effort to go and get him in the summer transfer window. He was pretty majestic at the back. He looked calm. He looked comfortable, really controlled. The way he carries the ball, he's so comfortable carrying the ball out, doing his little turns, etc. I just hope other teams don't spot that and start really closing down on him. But he's got the pace and the ability to get back if he does lose the ball. He will have more difficult games to come against more difficult opposition, but his confidence was there to see. And he looks like the sort of footballer that enjoys defending, which is really, really comforting to see. He was absolutely superb in defence. I think he could, alongside Kilman, they're going to become a real force to be reckoned with. And, who knows? Over time, they could become one of the best central defensive units between them. Now, what I liked is Lopetegui in the post-match review, not only praising Kilman and Todibo, but also praising Mavropanos, even though Mavropanos didn't make it on the pitch, about, his effort and, the way he's carrying himself, and reminding everybody that this is a squad effort. Whether you play or you don't play, it's still a squad effort. And I think that's good for Mavropanos to be reminded of that, because Mavropanos, when he came on in the second half against Brentford last weekend at right back, had a really, really good game. And one would dare say, there's no reason why he shouldn't have maybe started this game against Ipswich at the weekend. But I liked what Lopetegui did there with his man management of reminding everybody that Mavropanos also had a role to play in the training, etc. Not just Todibo and not just Kilman. But Kilman, for me, looks the, quality, absolute quality. Then I think what was good to see is Jarrod Bowen getting back to his best. And having just been dropped from the England squad, you would have thought that, his head might have dropped a little bit, and maybe he wouldn't have put in as good a performance as we saw him put in. But it reminded Lee Carsley exactly what Jared Bowen is capable of doing. You know, he set up Antonio from the first minute of the game. And then he set up Paquetá for that tap in what, 69th minute? And in between that, sandwiched in between that, scoring a brilliant trademark solo effort, which we've now become accustomed to see him doing on a regular basis. I thought he was superb against Ipswich at the weekend. Well done to him. You know, and alongside players like Kudus, you know, it's really, you know, this game is just what we needed at the right time of the season, just what we needed to get in order to get these players like Paquetá, like Kudus, like Bowen to really get moving. Then I've got to praise Mikel Antonio. You know, like I said, you know, there are times when I've talked about Antonio and I've said he's no longer Premier League ready. You know, he's no longer got it, etc. And as many have been saying, you know, he's more of an impact sub than he is a starter. But what we saw on Saturday against Ipswich was the old Antonio, closing down defenders, using from the front, forcing them into errors, using his physique in the manner that we all know he can, in winning almost every 50-50, barging players out of the way to win the ball, etc. He looked sharp, he looked fit, and he looked up for it. And he caused Ipswich defences no end of problems. And that's absolutely fantastic. But what is a massive shame now is that I think he's been called up to the Jamaican squad. I'm pretty certain he will be. And that means he's going to be away for the next 2 weeks, potentially playing games against Nicaragua in the early hours of Friday morning, and then followed up by a home game against Honduras, home as in Jamaica, again, or wherever it is they play their home games. I think maybe it's America. I'm not 100% sure. But anyway, he's going to be away and he'll be playing again if he's selected in the early hours of Tuesday the 15th. And then that means he and several other players like Paquetá and one or two others, Alvarez and so on, are going to be making the long trip back to London to get themselves physically and mentally ready for the early kickoff against Spurs on the 19th of October. And unfortunately, we're all aware that one player that seems to suffer most from international breaks when he returns is Antonio. He simply doesn't do as well as we would hope he does after international breaks. And that's, for me, is a massive worry. This game has come at the right time for a lot of good reasons, getting players, you know, building up their confidence, etc. But at the same time, it's come at the wrong time because we've now got this damned international break. But all credit to him for getting the early goal, for being fantastic up front for the 70 minutes that he was on until he got subbed. So do I now have a different opinion of Antonio going into future fixtures this season? No, to be honest with you, because for me, Antonio is still a player who can offer something, but only in limited doses and only against certain types of teams. Ipswich, absolutely ideal. Would I hope he puts in a performance like that against Spurs if he's selected? Absolutely, I do. But do I think it's going to be consistent? With the greatest of respect to him, no, I don't. But he pleasantly surprised me. You know, I looked at what he did on the pitch on Saturday and I thought, well done, mate. You know, this is exactly what we needed. Now, one more thing to mention. Congratulations to this young man, because he was brought on the 85th minute. He had the 5 minutes on the end of the game, plus the 4 minutes of stoppage time to give us a glimpse of what he can do. Guilherme, he looked lively. He seems to have an awful lot of pace, and he looked like he had a lot of confidence as well. And I'm really pleased. It was a good time for Lopetegui to bring Guilherme on. One may say, oh, shades of Moyes. That's what Moyes used to do. Bring on a young player when there's nothing to play for. I don't care. You know, I think it's allayed a lot of fears about, well, what's happened to this 20-odd million pound Brazilian youngster? Why are we not seeing him, etc.? We haven't seen him because he hasn't been ready. Now he's ready. Will we get to see more of him moving forward? I hope so. I hope so. Why not? And I think in some games to come, he will get his time. He will get game time. And I'll be pleased to see more of him. Look, it was a really good performance. The manner in which we set ourselves up against Ipswich on Saturday, is that gave me a lot of confidence and a lot of hope as to how we're going to move forward for the remainder of the season. Do I expect us to play that way in every game? No, I don't. There are going to be times when we won't be as good as what we were against Ipswich on Saturday. But there's a building frame there. We've seen glimpses of it, as I said, throughout other games, like second half against Man City and so on and so forth. We've seen glimpses of it throughout the season so far, but it all came good against Ipswich, and long may it rain. But it ain't going to upset me, and it ain't going to surprise me if we have the odd blip here and there. But if we can put in even half that performance against Spurs in a couple of weeks' time, then who knows? Maybe we'll get a positive result out of that. Like I said, if you've enjoyed the content and you've yet to become a subscriber, please do subscribe. But either way, if you've enjoyed the content, please do hit that like button. And I'll see you for the West Ham Weekly on Monday evening. Have a good rest of the weekend, whatever's left of it. And I will see you all very soon.